Bees! Bees! It'll take more than that! Hi, Zizaran here with another build guide for 3.15 Expedition, and this is going to be Summon Raging Spirits Boom SRS Bees. So this is an incredibly strong build and was my strongest build in all of 3.14. On hardcore I took down Uber Elder, Uber Aziri. I was farming Uber Aziri, did like 10-15 kills, maybe more. I was farming the Feared and it was incredibly strong. It was such a great experience, especially once I like heavily invested into it and really got the ball rolling. But actually works pretty good on a low budget too. So first, let me tell you who this build is for. This is a really, really good league starter for a trade league. If you are playing this on solo self-on, I would say that you have to be prepared for a little bit of anguish if you can't find a Tavukai, because if you're using Infernal Legion to make sure that the minions explode, then you're virtually missing a multiplier gem. This should be like relatively less affecting you in 3.15 because our multipliers are smaller, but I think you're going to want all the damage you can get, so you obviously want to find a Tavukai, and sadly we have no way to target farm this amulet anymore. Now, let's talk a little bit about the nerfs and how they affect this build. This was a build that already had an insane amount of damage. It doesn't have a large amount of clear, but it has a crazy single target. And I was basically close to one-shotting Uber Aziri and very many things like that. Obviously, that was with a very heavy investment of like 50 to 60x, but it's nice to have a build that you can really juice up that still works on a low budget. Now, the minion damage nerfs affected a lot. We basically cannot use minion damage as a gem in this build at all. Even if you have no other support gem, it literally gives you like 600 more damage or something. It's virtually useless. And that is because it lowers the life of the minion instability, so it doesn't give us anything. So we're just like replacing that gem, which is actually pretty doable on this build. Talk a little bit about how to play, and as you can see in the background, I'm also using Spectres. Now, initially I was thinking about using like some tank Spectres or just some Spectres to, you know, apply elemental army and be in the way, and that's okay too, and focusing on the Summon Raging Spirits in this way is doable. You could also completely ditch Spectres and use a Comb's Heart, but what I found was really nice was to get a really good +1 Spectre chest, 6 Link It, and get Frost Auto Scouts as your minions. You can also use Syndicate Operatives. I did try those for a while, but I felt that the Frost Auto Scouts were the best because that I wasn't converting the Syndicate Operatives. So Frost Auto Scouts are already fully elemental, so it takes advantage of the fact that we're doing elemental equilibrium. It's pretty simple for mapping. You're literally just right-clicking, and then on bosses, you would be throwing down Orb of Storms to gain more damage and curse the enemies. So if you're unfamiliar with any of my build guides, I'll walk you through it a little bit. We do a step-by-step thing for leveling in the start, so it's very easy to see. You don't just get the full skill tree and have to figure out where you're going. We also show you what ascendancy we're taking in the video. Bandits would be skill point. However, especially if you're in hardcore, taking Illyria early on for the regen and the resist is never a mistake, and you can respec later for 20 regrets and an Onyx Amulet. Pantheons is Solaris and Relic Kesh. And the skill tree should be pretty easy to follow. I think it is actually slightly better on softcore, because on softcore, you can sacrifice some of the life. You see that I only have 180% life here with 2 cluster jewels. You could also decide that you're taking, for example, Fettle jewels or Surging Vitality jewels here on hardcore, so that you're getting more life if you want to. You can easily get 220% life on this build, but if on softcore you go for full damage, you get a very large amount of damage on the minion instability. And the build should easily reach somewhere between like 3 to 5 million damage with minion instability and all the cluster jewels. And even without the cluster jewels, it should be very strong. If we take a quick look at mine here, I have more like life things and stuff like that. So I wanted to make sure that I had 7k life, and I have 2.6k energy shield as well. And if you do get a really good Spectre chest on, for example, an energy shield base, you could probably get 3, maybe even 4k energy shield. And I also made another change for my build on hardcore, which might be interesting if you're watching this as a hardcore player, and that is getting a spell damage jewel, which obviously doesn't do any damage for us, but that was just to get the Conjured Wall and Mage Hunter cluster jewels. That's just to get more spell block. Now, I am also using Rumis here, and I probably would use that again, but you gotta remember that Rumis did get nerfed, so it's less of a bad thing if you don't have it, and you probably won't get fully max block And also remember, especially if you have a life on block shield, that you can get glancing blows, which we don't even have right now. I have actual true max block, but getting max block with glancing blows should be very easy for this build. So it's incredibly tanky and very high damage. So we start out by leveling with Freezing Pulse and then switch into Summon Raging Spirits at level 4, a little bit slow until level 8 where we get Infernal Legion, and you can rush straight for the minion instability node before picking up anything else if you want, and they'll make a big difference. And there are lots of minion nodes early on as well. Once we're level 8, everything is pretty easy. We can't use minion damage anymore, sadly. Even if you're on a 4 link, it'll basically do very, very little damage. It's kind of never ever worth it, especially with like the mana stuff. Getting level 38 is very, very big because then we do get Unleash, which is huge. And we have some endgame options here as well. And Power is a lot better now, especially at level 4. It's a really, really good gem. And you can use Summon Raging Spirits in an actual 6 link. Obviously, it's very, very strong in a helmet. So I'll show you what the helmets look like. Here is an endgame one. Normally, we would have done minion life and minion damage in the helmet. Now we're going to be using minion life and concentrated effect. You can also use less duration because you're not really expecting them to last the full duration. They're gonna die before that anyway. And we have loads of like different gear sets, and you can see here early on the only thing you want on a wand is basically plus fire spell skill gems. You can also get minion damage. I think 60, maybe 70% minion damage would be the same as +1 level. And other than that, it's literally just life. I didn't bother including any resist on gear. It doesn't really matter what specific piece you get them on. It only matters that you make sure you're a resist cap. And I would say in this patch, Chaos Resist is more important than before. Moving on to the mid game, the #1 most important thing that you can get for this build is a Tavukai, and then also a trigger wand. Being able to get Bone Offering and keeping that up all the time is very important, so make sure that you're farming your unveils. Tavukai is incredibly strong for this build. The minion duration isn't super important, however the damage goes all the way up to 80% and the maximum life goes all the way up to 100% increase. So really, really good. And if you find multiple, this is obviously a pretty good target for a corruption, seeing as we don't really care about the 4 life regen per second. Now the most important stat on this amulet is that you want the minions have -17 to 17 chaos resist to be as close to -17 as possible. That is because that'll make our minions kill themselves faster, and the faster, like, we basically end up getting more damage per second and less of a delayed damage. That is actually one of the main drawbacks of the build, especially for things like Legion and things like that. The build can feel pretty bad because you don't really get to clear enough. The AI of the build isn't really that good, and this is where our Spectre minions really help out. Now, one of the things I found ended up being really important for the build was to get an unending hunger. Until then, the Spectres are a little bit more useless. This was a very big difference. So another reason that this might be more punishing on Soul Safan. There are some div cards for it, but it's very hard to farm. So, however, if you are playing Trade League, getting an unending hunger will make your Spectres actually pretty worthwhile. Obviously, we have lost a lot of damage, so I don't know if they're going to clear tier 60 normal monsters as easily as before, but for the most part, you could see me just running through everything, and a lot of the time the Spectres will clear everything up, and they'll certainly help with clearing. They do, however, not really add a lot of single target. It is just really nice for helping with clear. And if you don't like the Spectres, you can easily pick up a Comb's Heart and ditch the Spectres entirely. Getting something like increased offering effect as well would be really nice. That will help you be able to go true block without glancing blows, because your bone offering will be incredibly strong. And getting a decent amount of hybrid is obviously quite nice for this build. If you're able to get like 7 or 8k life and 3 or 4k ES, that's a very hefty pull for a max block build. The absolute best in slot shield that you could get would be energy shield and life on block. If you get this on a shield, nothing else matters. But other stats that are good is spell block and then as much life as you can get. If you are able to get another stat, that would be plus fire spell skill gems, would be really strong as well. Gem levels are huge for the build. Second best amulet to Tavukai would literally be something with life and resist. And then if you want to get damage from an amulet, that would be +1 int and +1 fire spell skill gems. Other uniques for the build, Replica Siegebreaker is really nice. The normal one works as well. At some point you might feel like you have enough clear or enough damage, and you can end up just getting a really heavy life belt with just, if you're able to get a Hunter or Elder belt with percentage life, these are huge. I managed to craft, this is actually one of the best items I've ever had in Path of Exile, because getting these stats with a essence is insane. So using fair essences on belt would be really nice, and hoping that you get percentage life or just high life would be really good. Other than that, you can see all the gear is just basically stacking as much life as you can. And yeah, the character that I had is Zizaran, boom, 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 boom. And this is one of the nicest characters I've ever had. So the auras that I have ended up with for this character is Aspect of the Crab, Vitality, and Skitterbots. I would say, obviously you don't get Aspect of the Crab super early, but it is very, very strong on block builds. And I would like to say we are very likely to need Clarity at this point as well. As a super endgame helmet, obviously this enchant is insane. All the other ones are okay too, like the minion damage enchant and restoration enchants wouldn't hurt too. However, if you are able to do an awaken orb and get a minion life, conk effect, hypothermia helmet with +3 gem levels, they're very hard to craft, play around with in Craft of Exile, but they are very strong for a very insane investment if you want this to be your main character of the league. So play around with the clarity levels and try to make sure that your mana feels okay, and you can always use a mana flask as well until you feel like your mana is able to stabilize. Obviously getting a boot enchant with 35% mana regen will help, but losing the extra 35 that it was before with 70 is gonna hurt. So let's do the Q&A at the end of every video. Are there too many gems to equip? Yes, there actually is. I feel like unset rings, especially until you do vermilions, are pretty good for this. I feel like I remember that I wanted unset rings, which is a completely viable change. And worst case scenario, you could drop, for example, Tempest Shield. Can the player have mana issues? It's 3.15. Probably everybody has mana issues. I don't know how bad the changes are going to be, but I'm very worried about it. Again, high level clarity and enduring mana flask are good options for solving this. Useful leveling uniques. The number one thing here is getting 2 1s with +1 fire spell skill gem level. You can get it on a shield as well, but that is your number one thing early. You could also get a +2 duration tabula, and that would be insanely strong. Gem levels are great for this build, and that means that our cruel ascendancy with +2 gem levels will be a huge power spike. As far as sustain and stuff, this build uses vitality and has an okay amount of regen. We have an insane amount of defense. Whether you're able to do glancing blows with a life on block shield or actual true block, it is a powerhouse. And somehow I died to Pirandus Manor. I farmed like 20-30 Uber Aziris, countless Uber Elders, loads of Cortex, everything the endgame has to offer. No idea how I died to Pirandus Manor. The boss crit me, I guess, but it was brutal. Hurt. The biggest drawback to this build is definitely that the clear can feel a little bit clunky. I think it will for quite a lot of builds in this patch, so maybe it evens the playing field quite a lot. I honestly think this is by far the strongest build I played in 3.14, but I think it'll be a powerhouse of a build in 3.15 as well. As far as the financial hurdles for this build, getting a +1 Spectre chest with 6 things could be pretty expensive. Obviously it's not necessary, and I've played this build with Chrome's Heart, which I would frequently put on for bosses because the Spectres, they don't really do any damage, they're just for clear. Other than that, getting a Tavukai, if a lot of people play the build, Tavukai could be expensive, and it is insanely important for the build. Siegebreaker, usually pretty cheap. You can use the normal one as well. It doesn't really matter that much. The replica one is better, however. But the biggest thing is that this build is hard to play on SSF because you really rely on a Tavukai, and the biggest financial hurdle would be Awaken Orbs for like your endgame helmet. Other than that, really strong build. And another positive about this build is that there is a new minion support gen called Reaper. We might be able to throw that in. Maybe it'll be really good instead of the Spectres. I don't know. But what I do know is that the Reaper will probably not be a large respec. So if that gem turns out to be really strong and you don't want to risk it as your League starter, Summon Raging Spirits will be a safe one, and you probably won't have a large respec to switch into the new Reaper gem, which is really advantageous. So I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Thanks so much for watching. Sharing the video is one of the best ways you can support it. Sub if you like the video, but more importantly, try to die less than I do.